Hello, my name is Ivy Prosper, and welcome to my channel where I tell stories from Africa and the African diaspora. Today, I have someone that I truly admire who's been doing some amazing things here on the continent. His name is Jay Cameron. He's an entrepreneur and an advocate for bringing Africa and the diaspora, the African diaspora, together. And he's done an amazing job at it. Not only has he been bringing so many people from the diaspora to Ghana, to Tanzania, Kenya, other parts of Africa, South Africa, he's also been bringing them to other places around the world too, to see a little bit of African history, people of African descent. And he's an author, and he is just doing so many impactful things. I am excited to have him here today. Jay Cameron, out of his busy schedule, let's have a chat with him now. Now, Jay, thank you so much again for taking the time out to speak with me today.
You're very welcome. Anytime Ivy calls, I know where I need to be. Without question, everything stops.
Thank you. Thank you. So you're back in Ghana again. You've been here multiple times. I want to first hear, because I know there's people watching who may know who you are, and there's people who have never seen who you are. So I want you to briefly introduce yourself, who you are, where you came from.
Sure. All right. My name is Jay Cameron. I am the founder of Maximum Impact Enterprises, and we focus on bridging the gap between Africa and the African diaspora by way of travel experiences, books, and documentaries and other educational resources. So we're here to tear down a lot of the misconceptions about both sides, whether it be those who are from the African diaspora abroad, whether it be in the US or Brazil or Canada, and then the myths and the misconceptions that have been spread around the world about those who are continental Africans. So we're really bridging the gap.
You definitely are. And where are you from originally? You're from the US, but from which state?
Sure. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, raised in Washington, D.C.
Okay. So in Charleston, South Carolina, that is the place where a lot of people don't know are the Gullah people.
You got it.
And they have a historical tie with Africa.
Yes, and it's still present today. That's the part. It's the only place in the U.S. that I've been to, other than maybe New Orleans in that area, but the only place in the U.S. where you can feel the African influence, and it's so heavy and it's so strong. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you can see where the two coasts connect when you go to the Charleston, Savannah, Wilmington, Jacksonville, Florida, that whole corridor. Mm-hmm. It is amazing. But when I was growing up, none of us wanted to be Geechee. That's what they say there. They don't put the Gullah on it. They call it Geechee because they have a dialect that sounds very different. So it sounds like broken English. Uh-huh. So like a lot of my family members would say, oh, you talking that Geechee talk, you talking that Geechee talk. And they would say, don't talk like that. Speak proper English. Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, that's where I was born. And I was raised in Washington, D.C., which has its own dialect, its own culture. And then no one ever talked about traveling to Africa.
Yeah, it's not something that people talk about. We, in the travel industry, you hear about like London, go to Paris, go to, Barcelona, different places, Athens. But Africa is a place that we don't usually hear about unless it's to see the pyramids in Egypt. Or to go to Morocco, or to see a safari.
You might go to South Africa.
Yeah.
To the extent it's those three right there. Maybe Kenya.
Yeah.
So you might get 4: Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, Kenya. Mm-hmm. Outside of that,
nobody cares.
And a lot of people don't even know Egypt is in Africa.
Yes. They have this assumption that is in the Middle East.
Right.
It's funny you say that because I had a teacher when I was in elementary school. I was about 11 years old, and she put the map of Africa, geography teacher.
Oh, wow.
She put the map of Africa and, actually it was the whole globe, but my eyes went to Africa. And she said that Egypt was not in Africa.
Really?
And I was like, I put my hand up. I was like, Egypt is in Africa. And she's like, no, it's not. And she was arguing with me that it's not in Africa. And I'm like, but it's clear on the map. It's in Africa. So that was one of my first experiences of seeing how there's this misconception about the countries in Africa, Now,
was this in Canada?
This was in Canada.
So, because you were raised in Canada.
I was raised in Canada, yeah. Born in Ghana, but raised in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
But it's a lot of that going on. I mean, because in the African diaspora, and that's what I focus on now, because I had to learn that the American education system was so deficient and so malnourished within itself about the continent, and probably intentional about not teaching about the continent. Because when you think about it, if you keep all of these people who have nearly identical genetic components, if you keep them separated, now they identify as something other than their actual genetic ethnicity. Now they're identifying culturally or geographically.
Right.
So I'm American. And I always tell people, what is American? American is basically a group of immigrants, except for those who were indigenous, and they're coming from all over the place. And the only thing that we really identify with is perhaps some elements of the culture.
Right.
But genetically, many of us are very, very different from the land we know as America.
Right.
But our genetics, we'll find, especially for those of us in the African diaspora, link right back to primarily West Africa, especially in that part of the world. I took some DNA tests to Honduras. I went to Cuba. I went to Brazil. I went to Colombia. And I said, I wanted to see if these tests showed that the people were from there or where they came from.
Right.
All of them, the majority of their DNA came right back to West Africa.
Wow. You see that?
It was fascinating. And one gentleman in Honduras, his DNA estimate was nearly identical to mine. And we're looking at each other, and because he had a lot of melanin.
Yeah.
And he said, I hope that I come from Africa. I said, brother, don't worry. We got you. You come from Africa. If you don't, I don't know where. And it's not that everybody that has melanin comes from Africa, but I could look at his features. I could put him anywhere in West Africa and he would blend right in. So what I realized, I spent most of my life with no interest in Africa. We used to tease people as children if they had African features. And that was unfortunate. And it was really bad in my family because my family had a bad colorism issue. And that's normal in much of Black culture, unfortunately.
Right.
Because everyone wanted to be the house slave, if you will. Nobody wanted to be called a slave, but they wanted to be the house servant or whatever. And if anybody looked like they should have been in the field, then they would tease them based upon whether their skin complexion, their hair texture, and these are all these things that were ingrained from the previous generations. Because Gen X, we just weren't born into, somebody had to train us. And so all of this poor training led to a subtle self-loathing, but then also a lack of interest in Africa. So then Sally Struthers comes along, and yes, I said her name, comes along with all of the different aid campaigns growing up as children. Oh, we're going to go to Africa and feed the sick, starving babies. And that was the narrative. So why would somebody want to come to even visit?
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about the countries. We didn't know there were, at that time, probably like 50 different countries. Now it's 54, 55 different countries. So there's this lack of interest. There is this almost looking down on anyone from Africa and feeling, people would come over from Africa and we tease them like, oh yeah, look, they're African. Let me see, y'all got shoes on. All of these little things, the big things, really. And as I matured, I realized how incredibly ignorant I was and how incredibly ignorant my family was and the culture around me. And I knew once I came to Ghana, I was so ashamed of myself when I got off of that plane in 2018. It took me an entire lifetime to work up the courage because I was afraid.
What made you actually make the move to get on a plane to come when there was that misconception already?
Well, I spent all of these years, just in life, going through and wanting to go to Africa one day. One day I want to get there, but the only thing I ever saw people going on mission trips or some sort of charity. I never saw anyone going
just for vacation.
Just for vacation. Yeah. I knew nothing about the beaches in Zanzibar. I knew nothing about the beaches in South Africa or the beaches in Kenya or Cote d'Ivoire or Senegal. These are places that are so foreign to me, but I knew everything about Big Ben and Buckingham Palace and the Eiffel Tower and Athens and the different ruins and the Colosseum in Rome. All of this was pumped into my mind to say, this is what you aspire. My dream vacation should be Rome.
It's true.
But I have no connection. I do have some genetic connection there, but it's smaller compared to the continent. So I said to myself, I was successful in the US, building businesses, just kind of doing the daily grind. And I said, if I don't go myself, no one's going to take me. And I don't care what it costs. I'm going to go. I didn't understand in that moment that I was unlocking a new phase of life. And it was a phase of life that the broader colonial and imperial systems did not want me to know about, because it was easy. It's good to keep you, basically, I call it the plantation, on the plantation, working and fueling the tax system there. But when you get outside of it, you say, wait a minute, you didn't tell me the story about the Chikara people in Cameroon, or the Mende people in Sierra Leone, or the Yoruba people in Nigeria, or the Ewe people in Ghana. None of that was ever discussed. It was just Africa. And this is
as
Africa,
one whole monolith.
Monolith. So, I came, and the minute I stepped outside of the airport, I knew my life was changing. I felt it, and it was nothing spooky. It was very practical. It was very, you know what? No one told me. Why am I afraid? Not once did I feel fear. But in my mind in the US, within that box, I was afraid. Everyone was so kind. Everyone was so welcoming. All of that, they don't like you. They don't want you to come back.
It's not true.
Oh, it was. So from there, I was in a Chinese restaurant in Kumasi.
Ghanaians love their Chinese food.
I was at Chinese restaurant in Kumasi, Ghana. And I said to myself, I know 40 some odd million other people in the US. I wasn't really even familiar. I didn't know that there were more in Brazil. Because, in the US, we even think we have trauma superiority. Oh, you don't understand our story. How come y'all over there don't understand what we went through? I said, well, do you understand their story? Do you understand what happened to continental Africans?
The colonization that happened here as well completely changed things.
But I knew nothing about colonization.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about the imperial interests. I knew nothing about Brazil and Portugal and Cuba and Spain and Colombia and Spain. I knew nothing. See, you think that Africa is over here, but when you go to Brazil, you see the Yoruba people.
I really need to go there.
Oh, you got to go to Brazil, because then in Nigeria, when I went to Nigeria, they have a whole Afro-Brazilian community of people who came back.
Really?
Yes. It is fascinating to see how the African diaspora connects, to see and to learn about the Haitian Revolution. Never knew anything about the Haitian Revolution and how Haiti was paying France reparations for their own freedom, but how the French system, that's how they operated. So when it was time for independence, what they would do is say, okay, we'll give you independence, but you have to pay us reparations.
And it's so crazy to think that the people who were the colonizers, the slave traders, that they have the audacity to say you have to pay us for your freedom. It's so wild.
Well, they had the audacity to come and do it in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
So at that point, the thief does not willingly give up the stolen goods. And in many ways, they still hold on to it. And that's why you see many of the revolutions happening now in places like Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger and other parts of the world, because, people are waking up and they're saying, we understand that the hand that's always been pressing on us is still there, even though you've given us this term independence, that's under the guise of independence. When you go to Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal and you still have the French CFA as the currency, that's when it's wild. It's wild. So that's when you know that there's something deeper. But I knew none of this in the United States. All I could see is through the eyes of racism and some sort of discrimination. That type of thing is what my worldview was based upon. But then when I stepped outside of it, my worldview opened up. And then I knew I had a responsibility to go back and at least be a bridge for people who weren't interested. There are a lot of people in the US who are not interested. They love the illusion or whatever it is. They love it. But there are other people who are saying, I don't want to walk around for another generation, or I don't want to pass this misinformation down to the next generation. And they come out and they see and they want to learn. And those are the people that we've been able to touch, almost 2,000 in 3.5 years.
So now you're here, you've brought thousands of people to Ghana. How many, not Ghana only, but to different countries in Africa. How many people now have you been able to?
Almost 2,000.
Almost 2,000.
And we have been to every region except the central part of Africa. So North Africa with Egypt, South Africa with South Africa and Zambia and Zimbabwe. Morocco, and then over in the east with Kenya, Tanzania, Seychelles. We're bringing in Ethiopia next year. And then, of course, the West, the West has my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure that the West is never neglected, from Senegal, Gambia, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, of course, Ghana, Nigeria. And I'm a dual citizen in Sierra Leone. We haven't done a tour to Sierra Leone yet, but I'm a dual citizen there because my ancestry linked back to Sierra Leone. My African ancestry linked back to Sierra Leone. So I'm a proud Sierra Leonean as well, of the Timoney tribe.
That's good.
I should say Timoney people, because tribe actually is a dated term. And it a lot of the terms that we use have been given to us by the colonizer, like sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
A tribe is an actual term, but it's dated. So now when you hear tribe, you think of primitive people.
Yeah,
that
it has that connotation to it, yeah.
So even with the language, I had to learn how not to say certain things. Like I don't say the castle, I say the dungeon, because a castle is designed, the connotation is positive. When in actuality, it's a crime scene. So it's a dungeon. It is a chamber that is designed for torture. So when I started learning this, my language started changing and I started understanding a broader context, which is, again, what we need, because it empowers you. There's certain aspects of American history for the Black American or the African American or the Negro American or the colored American.
Whatever term you grew up with or use, yeah.
There were certain aspects of that I had no interest in until I came here, because I've gotten flack from other so-called Black Americans for coming here. It's like,
and why do you think that is? Because I know I've heard terms of some people in the U.S., African Americans, who've used the FBA, the Foundational Black Americans, and then the other one, the ADOS group. Talk about the difference between the two and why there's so much pushback from them when it comes to people choosing to go to Africa.
Well, if they really understood, many of their leaders were spending time in Ghana with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So you have someone like Martin Luther King and a Malcolm X and a Maya Angelou and a W.E.B. Du Bois. Many of those people are the ones that they hold in high regard. And they're saying, hey, you shouldn't go over there. But Dr. Du Bois is buried here. Martin Luther King was here when Ghana gained its independence in 1957. He was at the ceremony.
Yeah.
With Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. If you search Martin Luther King, Ghana independence, in his own words, you hear him saying how it touched him. So it just goes to speak once again to some of the misinformation and to some of the ignorance that circulates around within the U.S. Now, here's where I do understand some of the concerns. And I think a lot of it really stems from today and modern immigration, when you have people coming from Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya or wherever and coming to the U.S. and disrespecting what the ancestors did in the U.S. to pave the way for not only those who were born in the U.S., but then those who are coming to the U.S. now. So there's this conflict that can sometimes come in when there's a disrespect for those who've paved the way. So I get that part of it, but to say, well, you shouldn't go over there and be a part, that's still another play from the colonizer to say that you all are different. We're different because of where we are. We have different stories somewhat, but at the same time, we have a lot of similarities. So what I focused on was the similarities to see how we can bridge that gap. And so, again, where I get the flack from is the indigenous crowd.
Yes, there's that group as well who say that they were already there.
Yes. And that's when, and again, I don't want to speak generally for everyone who holds that perspective, because when you look at the African diaspora, many of us are a melting pot of ethnicities. So we have the European side. So I have a lot of European. I'm not, it is what it is.
Because there was a lot of people who had children within. There's a lot of, whether it was through trauma of rape or through choosing to be with, there was definitely a mixture of.
There's a whole lot of mixture going on. When you do that DNA, you see, oh, wow, okay, so there's Italy in here. I mean, it's just as much European mixture. When I say that, meaning the percentage is smaller. So I have like 25% European DNA. 70, roughly 70% or so African DNA. And then there is some indigenous DNA in there as well.
Of course.
But that doesn't mean I'm all indigenous. I recognize, okay, there's this indigenous US side, there's this European side, and then there's this African side. So I don't have to pick one.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, now, obviously, if I'm walking down the street,
nobody's going to look at you and say European.
No, not at all. They're going to think, Nigerian. That's what I get mostly. Either I'm a Black American, or if I go to Nigeria, I have no problems in Nigeria. They all think I'm evil in Nigeria. But I recognized that it's not as simple as, oh, we were here first, or we were here. Now, I do believe that there were people who were of either African from the continent or of African descent who had the ability to build boats and to sail the world. I do not believe that the Europeans were the first ones to have boats. You even see in the hieroglyphics in Egypt where people were on boats and on ships.
Yeah.
And so this was not something and these were melanated people. So this is not people they were not European, in other words. So I do believe that there were people already in what we know as the United States and that part of the world. But I recognize that there was also this ethnic mix that was taking place. And I also recognize there were people from the continent. I want to be clear, people from Africa who already went. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
There's evidence to show that as well. But this whole notion that there is no African DNA. And then the funny part is they'll have family members who will go do the DNA test.
And then
I said, y'all gaslighting yourself. You gaslight yourself. And it's like, here it is. That stuff is done for entertainment purposes. And they have different leaders, different people there who, oh, you can't trust that stuff. But then they go back and cite U.S. archives history as their source of information, but yet talk about how anyone who believes the history has been fooled. I'm saying now,
you're contradicting
you
themselves.
Can't have it both ways. So you deal with that. But I always go with the proof is in the pudding. You don't need a DNA test. You come here and you look around and you'll know.
It's so true. It's so true. Because I've, through work the last few years, I've met a lot of people who, when they get here, they notice different things and they say, is that why we do this? Is that why we do that? Like somebody who came from New Orleans noticed the extravagance of the funerals and the marching band that somebody had. And they were like, we have this in New Orleans. She was like, what is this? So I think, like you said, even when they don't take a DNA and you see it around you, you realize there's more similarities than they realize, that they've been handed down and you don't know why it's been handed down, but then you see the source. You can't deny when somebody comes, and see, the thing is, a lot of those different movements they might realize they've been influenced by the broader imperial or colonial interests to stay away. Because if you stay away and you read a book or you watch a documentary and that's your only source of information, you don't have firsthand knowledge. You have not come here and tasted the food. You've not been in the environment to watch how people move. And then that's all you can say. Well, this is what they told me. Now, here's something it shocked me. And it shocked a lot of people. I was in Benin in 2019 and I was getting ready to go to Brazil. And I went to the Portuguese Museum in Benin. And I looked on the wall and the lady looked like she was kind of passed out. The guy was holding her up, looked like she kind of fallen out like they do in church. And I was like, this is really very interesting. What's going on here? So, and it said that it mentioned another picture of Salvador. Salvador is the city in Brazil, not El Salvador, but the city in Brazil that had the largest population of enslaved people go through. And Rio was another large place as well, a large port. So I looked. And I said, there's a connection here. I went online. I said, let me look at the religious festival in Benin. And I went to look at the religious festival in Benin. And I looked and I said, oh my goodness. It looked identical to the Black American Church. The same movements. I don't know if you've ever seen how I've been in the Black American Church.
So you know how it goes down. You know how that thing goes down? Well, it was going down just like that in Benin. Now, in Benin, they practice voodoo. So it was a voodoo festival. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is looking just like, and I put the two videos side by side. So there was a moment of cognitive dissonance when some people from the Black church saw it. Well, what spirit are they operating in? I'm like, hey, just look at these movements.
Yeah.
Because where did the Black church come from?
Yeah.
The Black church did not exist in the United States until everyone came over, and then where did it come from? So what I encourage people to do is to search for the origins of why we do what we do, because we think we're disconnected. But when you look at the movements, the body, I was like, I said, there's no way, there's no doubt where this connection is. Now, obviously, I don't know what they practice and believe but it's the movements. So what it did was it prompted me to go research more. I didn't just block my mind. Oh, they're operating in a different spirit. I like, well, let me just go, well, where did this come from? How did this happen? I went to Brazil. In Brazil, I always search for the origins. So in the US, we have historically Black colleges and universities.
Yeah.
Majority of them are named after white people. Yeah.
Are they really?
Yes.
Are they really?
Not all, majority.
I assumed it was named after some prominent Black person. I never actually, I admit that I had never actually taken the time to research who they were named after.
Yeah, and many Black Americans haven't either. And so when I discovered this, and I had no interest in this until I came to this continent and started putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And the pieces of the puzzle forced me to go back and say, why do we do what we do in the US? So I'm saying, okay. Now, there's some HBCUs that are named after cities. There's some HBCUs named after prominent Black people, but the majority are named after white people.
This is wild.
And these are facts. I'm not saying anything. I'm not knocking anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is what it is.
Yeah.
So when I'm walking around with my shirt on, see what the colonizer did and the slave master did was they mastered branding themselves.
Oh yeah.
They gave us their names. They gave us their culture. They gave us their education. And some say they gave us their religion. So, they gave us their currency. They gave us their systems. So in actuality, we became a hybrid of something, of them, but then also of our indigenous cultures and ethnicities. So for those who are intentional about going back and really getting a broader understanding, those are the ones who find a different kind of freedom. Because now I'm not the American education system. I don't need degrees to validate me because I understand. I mean, if I want to go get a degree because I'm being strategic, but me having 5 degrees does not necessarily make me the most educated person in the room. If I've not had exposure to all of the potential or the broader education that's available to me. If all I'm doing is taking someone's curriculum, which is oftentimes from the colonizer or the imperial interest, the US or whoever, then that's where I'm educated. What more and more people are recognizing now with the information age is that education is so vast. And you can go, me learning about the Ewe people in Ghana, and just me eating with my hands, me getting some banku and some, what do I normally get with that? Okra stew. And me eating with my hands. That's a different kind of education. And me knowing how to wash my hand right there at the pot right there. Now that can get me further than all of those degrees if I'm in their culture. They see this Black guy coming in here, this old brony coming in here. And
they'll warm up to you.
They'll warm up and say, oh man, wait a minute. I'll go to Nigeria and get my egusi soup in the fufu, and I'm sitting right there, eating it in Rome. Now hold on, eating it in Rome at a Nigerian restaurant in Rome, sitting there.
Oh, you found a Nigerian restaurant in Rome?
Oh, I found 2 of them. Some of the best West African food you'll ever have.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there having
I went to Rome and never even thought about African restaurants being there.
We're everywhere. That's what I'm saying. And that's where the education comes in. I now encourage people to start asking deeper questions. Why do we do what we do? Where did it come from? Who said that this was right and this was wrong? What happened in this part of the world? Why were people forced into, before they could get on the ships, forced into becoming Catholics before they could get on the ships, and then being taken to this other place and being forcing them to leave their indigenous practices? See, those type of questions then connect with, in the US, to say, is this still happening today? Are they now, maybe they're not forcing us because it's been in place and instilled for hundreds of years, but maybe they are, maybe what they've done is influence us in such a way where we see their way as the right way and our way is the wrong way.
That part where we see it as the right way and ours is the wrong way. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
I come to Ghana and I'm talking to my brothers and sisters in Ghana, and they tell me about the education system and how and this was several accounts, I've heard some differing accounts, where if you did not speak proper English, you might be whipped.
Yeah, and then even I've heard stories about them saying not to speak your language in school. I know some schools I've heard are trying to change that now,
Yes.
but I know that there's a whole generation of people who had this experience of don't speak the local language, speak English in school, and getting in trouble from the headmaster, the teachers,
Even the term
because
headmaster.
yes, that term.
These
You're
are
right, because they still use that, the headmaster at the
in the
school.
master bedroom. It's all kinds
Yes.
of terms that
Yes. When I learned about master bedroom, I was like, oh my God,
and we just say it without
like
even
nothing.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
But then I've heard others argue and say, well, there's so many different languages in Ghana and Nigeria, and I'm using Anglophone countries, those are English-speaking countries. So we had to pick one language that we all spoke. And I said, well, why did you pick the colonizer language? Why'd you pick the white man's language? It really wasn't a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So then people think, you know what? Why didn't we pick like one other language? Why was the white man's language the superior language that everyone could agree on?
Mm-hmm.
See, it's those little subtle things that happen that we don't even think about because we consider it to be normal. And that's why the traveling, I inspire intercontinental travel within Africa to learn how different Cote d'Ivoire is from Ghana. That's a French-speaking country. When I say French-speaking, meaning colonized by the French. And, it's the depth of education and therapy. I'll put those two together. The travel has changed me as a Black American man. The issues that I had in the US,
Mm-hmm.
the heaviness that I had in the US is gone. So I'm free. I go to the US, I'm like, okay. I know I have options. I have a bed in Ghana. I have a bed in Tanzania. I can buy property here. I can buy property there. When they get on my nerves in the US, okay, I have options.
Mm-hmm.
But when you feel trapped, and so for a lot of people, the reason the mental health, and that's a big topic now, they're sitting down and talking to people, which I believe is very important. But I know for me, what I needed was to get outside of the environment because the environment was toxic. Even the people that I was talking to,
Mm-hmm.
toxic.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know they were toxic.
Mm-hmm.
They just only understood one language. So we were all in the same, it's like swimming in the same dirty bathtub. And everybody talk about getting clean. It's just water moving around. You put soap in it, but you're still in the same dirty water.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was happening culturally. So I said, that's what prompted me in 2018. Because everything was stagnant. I was frustrated. I was tired. And I was like, everybody I'm talking to is clueless. They're talking the same old talk. And when I stepped outside of that box and started meeting people and seeing the world, like now, if those people try to come and there's people within that box,
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, you can say whatever y'all want to.
A special thank you today to Psy Wine Cafe for the location for today's shoot. If you want to use Psy Wine Cafe for your upcoming party, whether it's a wedding reception, a bridal party, a bachelorette party, whatever it may be, or a birthday, a special someone you want to surprise, Psy Wine Cafe is the perfect place for you to do your event. You can also book it for your own film shoot. It's a great location for a television show, perhaps for a movie scene, or anything that you're looking to do. Just send an email to operations@saighana.com so you can book it today. So have you been able to encourage family members to come?
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. See that? So what happens is people will, when I first started, they were mocking me. Oh, you on that Back to Africa movement. Oh, I see you. That we had that back in the 80s. And I remember, late 80s and all. Oh, yeah. We were wearing all the different colors. And at first they mocked. And then when they saw I didn't care, they saw me climb Mount Kilimanjaro. They saw me meeting all of these new people
Mm-hmm.
and watching the YouTube channel take off. They're like, wait a minute, what's going on over there? And so several of them have taken the trip.
That's good.
And they're like, oh, wow. So I understood, oftentimes when you're a pioneer, and it's for all the pioneers in your family or just in society, you have to do it alone. But when you know that it is a divine assignment that you've been given, I didn't realize that it was divine. I just knew instinctively I needed to do something different, or else I'm gonna lose my mind up in here. So in the U.S. states, I was like, look, I got to do what I got to do, and so now it's inspired people to say I want to travel.
Mm-hmm.
I could have never seen nearly 2,000 people when I got on that plane. Afraid. I used to be afraid to fly. I would drive in DC. I would drive from DC to Baltimore to catch the cruise ship to go to Bermuda, because I didn't want to fly to Miami to catch the cruise ship to go down to the Caribbean. So I would do that. I'd been on planes before.
So you took the ship from Baltimore that goes down to Miami.
Well, no. It would go to Bermuda. It just went straight over to
Okay,
Bermuda.
Okay.
Bermuda's out in the Atlantic.
Okay. So straight there.
Yeah, instead of me getting on the plane to go to Miami. Like I wanted to go to, St. Martin and St. Lucia and places like that. But no, I think I'll just go to Bermuda.
How long was the boat ride?
It was a few days. You're on the boat 2 days, you're there for a day. And then you come back 2 days. So I'm on the boat most of the time.
Yeah, I was thinking it's a long journey.
And then, but this was my last trip to Bermuda was 2018. And I said, if I don't get on this plane and fly these 10 hours, I'm going to be... So I understand the fear, but a lot of the fear in the traveling comes from, we don't recognize it, but comes from the plantation. Because back during those times, there was no travel. You did not leave the plantation.
Yeah,
if you left, there was fear attached to it.
Because they could come and catch you and bring you back. With punishment or kill you.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was like a psychological barrier. Many people in the U.S. don't even travel outside of their roads.
Outside of their neighborhood, even. I met someone who lived in Brooklyn and hadn't even left Brooklyn. I'm like, how can you? Because he was like, I was going to Manhattan, and he was like, he's never been to Manhattan. From Brooklyn to Manhattan?
From Brooklyn to Manhattan.
How?
But that's psychological. And I understood everything I had to overcome to get here. And I said, well, you know what? It's my assignment to be the bridge. I came from that world.
Yeah.
I understand our fears and our concerns. I understand how we were raised. I understand what we've been told. I understand the pushback that you're going to get, or may get. I know what I got. And I had to still come through it. So when people see that, it resonates. And they say, no, I'm going to go with him because I know he knows. He knows my story. And I have so many people in their 70s, 80s, and even into their 90s who've come on these experiences because they say, you know what? He gets it. And then they bring their children and grandchildren, and it becomes a family thing. And it's so amazing to watch the chains, the psychological chains, fall off of people, whether it's in their mind, whether it's physical, whatever it is, it falls off of them. People who would have never traveled. They would have never set foot on this continent. They would have been happy going on a cruise down in Jamaica. And I love Jamaica, don't get me wrong. Getting on an all-inclusive cruise to Jamaica and doing that. But they came here. And now they're going out. We've had people travel with us 3 times in a year. Wow. It's the children's book series that came out of it. I didn't write children's books.
Yeah, I saw you have like activity books for the kids and stuff for them, for different countries.
Yeah. Which
opens up their mind and teaches them about exploring the continent.
All of that came from that one trip in 2018.
And it was before the trend of
yes.
When the Year of Return started in 2019 and the trend of people now looking at Ghana as a place to go. You came before all of that happened. And then you just got an opportunity to leverage, I guess, or did you find that was helpful?
It was very helpful.
It was helpful for what you were doing?
It was very helpful because the first group we brought was in 2019 for the Year of Return.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know what the Year of Return was. I just came. I was like, I just got to do something different because it's crazy over here. So
how many people were on that trip?
35.
Your first trip was 35 people?
Yeah.
Your first trip was 35 people?
Yeah, in DC, I was pretty influential and I had a large audience from all of the community service activities that I'd done over the span of like 20 years.
Okay.
So I put it out to the mailing list and they came.
Okay.
And from there, we produced documentaries. I did the Ghana Chronicles, and that inspired people to come, and it just kind of took off. And when you do what you're supposed to do, everything just kind of lines
Falls
up.
into place. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that, I was afraid. Of course, I was afraid. I'm bringing people to Africa. I mean, I'd never done that before, but here we are sitting down here talking to Ivy Prosper in Accra, Ghana. It's all good.
And you mentioned documentaries.
Yes.
You have one that's coming out soon.
Oh yeah, it's about Ghana.
A major one.
It really talks about the story, the journey of being a child indoctrinated in the U.S. systems, and then coming to Ghana and waking up. And it's a fascinating chronological account of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there are few words that I can really give it to justify or to articulate how I know it's going to impact people. I know it. It's when we were filming it, we filmed it here and we filmed it in the US. And I didn't leave any stones unturned. I'm not afraid to talk about things that I might have been afraid to talk about before,
mm-hmm.
like the educational system in the US. There's some good elements to it. It's not all bad.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like I said in the beginning, it's deficient. Talking about the cultures, talking about how I was raised, how I was taught to see the continent of Africa, and then what the reality is. So that documentary is going to, I just put a little blurb out the other day, just a little teaser.
Mm-hmm.
And folks are like, wait a minute, because it makes you think.
Yeah.
It makes you like, wait a minute. I was trained. The first thing I did when I went to first grade, before we opened the textbook, we pledged allegiance to a flag.
They do that in America. Yeah. You guys have that allegiance from kindergarten.
But when you think about it, that's insane.
Yeah.
You don't explain to a child
what it is.
I'm forcing you to pledge allegiance. I'm putting this over my heart. So there's a physical action, coupled with a psychological action. Then now I'm speaking it. But I really don't understand the history of that flag. All I understand is you told me there were 13 colonies, and this is what happened here, and then became 50 stars. What does that red represent? What does that red really represent? Who built this country? How has this country, which is actually a corporation, been set up? Why is it, the people who initially came over here, meaning those who were enslaved Africans, when they came here, what was their role or their descendants' role supposed to always be? So we want to think that, okay, things have changed. They've changed as far as on the surface.
Yeah, there's still a lot of deep rooted.
And it's deeper than racism. Racism is the smokescreen for classism. Classism is what fuels a capitalistic system. In school, I knew nothing about capitalistic systems.
Because they don't teach you that. They don't want people to know about money and how to become wealthy, how to, keep yourself from being poor, how to manage the credit system.
Sure.
They don't teach you that intentionally.
No, because if you understood the structure, then you would know how to position yourself differently. But if you're in a culture that from the inception of the corporation, AKA country, was intentionally placed at a lower economic level, and then other systemic elements like redlining and everything else that's come along, the insane student loan system in the US that is designed to keep this modern day slavery for those who are unassuming and fall into it. If you don't understand it, and you say, how does somebody get to the top of that, like the top 1%? What did they do to get there? It surely wasn't going out and working 80 hours a week.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So you have to adjust your mind. But if you don't know this, and your parents say, get in the system, get a good government job and stay there for 40 years and retire with benefits. See, even with that, our Gen Xers, when we came out of high school,
that's what we're taught.
Yeah,
go get a good degree, get a good job, work there 30, 40 years, and then you'll get a good pension, or benefits or whatever.
And what are we discovering now?
That's not No.
So
A lot of company can just ask you tomorrow. They can just let you go tomorrow. They can tell you you're not going to have any benefits. You've been made, redundant or whatever it is. And they can even change their policies while you're working there. You could be working there and you thought, oh, they're helping to contribute to my retirement fund by 50%. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, they send you a notice. We've made some adjustments. We are now only contributing 5%. You're like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
And then you feel like you have the right to something, but it's like, no, well, the company decided to do what they wanted to do.
And in the fine print, you signed this to say that we could change it whenever we
want.
And that's the that's the system. And we have adults who were teaching us. See, when we came out of high school, we had dot matrix, print master. There was no internet.
Yes, there was no internet.
There was no internet. There was all of this stuff. We did not see this day coming.
Yeah.
Where we had phones everywhere. You could record movies on phones. You could.
Oh yeah.
Maybe the Jetsons. That might have been something that we saw. But
cartoons.
Yeah. but what we have today, many people, many Gen Xers, if we had known, we would have prepared ourselves differently.
100%.
But the reason why we didn't know is because we were in a box and we were following the system. But when you get outside of the box and create your own system, you find opportunities outside of that. Mm-hmm. So now we're able to leverage, just like what you're doing with this show, which is going to blow up and it's going to be amazing because this is what you have been created to do. Every time I've seen you, you're always reporting, you're always telling stories. And now as you become more comfortable with it, you're going to find an audience, your audience. See, what a lot of entities like to do, take your talent mm-hmm. and use it to benefit their audience. And then for us, we're like, well, they're giving me an opportunity, but now you're seeing that you can create your own opportunities. Mm-hmm. And that's the beautiful part. And that's what so many of us need to do, see the opportunities that are available to us with the skill set that we have, the education that we have, the resources we have. All of those things coming together can create something very unique and very mm-hmm. special, but mm-hmm. we have to be in position to shift our mindset and to be able to do it. And so that's what's happening. More and more people are waking up.
Yeah, I think the power of social media is also contributing to that because people know that you can't take everything at face value and that you can take the time to research. Is this true? Is this not true? What do I think? Where is this coming from? Who owns the company that's putting this message out? And right. What is their agenda? Recently seeing one of the popular African Stream. I don't know if you've noticed, they've been removed off of social media.
Oh, really?
Oh, you didn't know?
No.
Yes, the African Stream, they've been giving all kinds of information with the African perspective on news.
I've not seen them in a while.
Yeah, so they were removed from YouTube, from Instagram, from Facebook. I think Twitter, now X, is the only platform that they're still on officially. So what they've done is other people are reposting old content, and then they've gone and opened up another page under their personal names to post some of their old content. The US government came out to say that they believe the African Stream is being funded by Russia.
Oh, well, the thing.
And when that came out, the Instagram and others took them off right away.
The one thing is, and it's unfortunate, and this is why we have to be wise. A lot of times what will happen is people say, oh, the US government said it, and they automatically trust it because they have been indoctrinated to trust in that flag, trust in that system, without stopping to say, okay. It's just like they demonized Gaddafi. They demonized, and I'm not saying these people are good, I'm just saying this, I'm giving you an example. Gaddafi, Sadat, not Sadat, I'm sorry, Hussein. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. They didn't demonize Sadat. Sadat was one of their friends. Right. And Sadat was president of Egypt, and Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq. Mm-hmm. So they'll pick people, they'll be in cahoots with them at first, mm-hmm. and then when they don't fall in line, now they demonize them, create a coup, kill them, get rid of them, and that is the U.S. way of doing things. Mm-hmm. They did it here in Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah. They do it all over the world. Mm-hmm. Down in, I believe in Chile, somebody fact checked that for me just to see. When I started understanding the tentacles of the United States government and the CIA, how can I pledge allegiance to that? Mm-hmm. How can I stand there and say with good conscience, y'all out here killing people and dominating and destroying the world because of your imperial interests, but yet you want me to put a pledge allegiance to it? I was born in the U.S. Mm-hmm. I have certain rights here. I'm going to use those rights. because my ancestors died and bled for these rights, but I don't have to stand here and pledge allegiance to terrorism around the world. Now, some people get a little nervous about that, but this is where I am. I'm free. So now at that point, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are waking up to that and saying, you know what? A lot of people who've been in the military, in the U.S. military, are coming out and saying, there's something going on up in there. A lot of people.
And they were on the inside, so I'm
they
sure
were on the
they know
inside.
something and why they're saying
Oh, yeah.
those
But they're
things.
afraid because, they take an oath. To say all these oaths and pledging allegiance. And unfortunately for many Black men and Black women, what ends up happening, the military is their only way out, especially in rural areas.
Right.
And so they don't understand there's a great side to the military when it does what it does and it's supposed to do and protect, serve, and defend. But then there's another side that's a little bit more sinister, that's operating in these little covert ways that the people are just afraid to even sit down and talk about. They're like, I can't believe that, but once you've been in it and you come out of it, now, here's the thing. If you're getting benefits from it and you're getting your check from it and you get your health benefits and all of that,
they're not going to talk.
I'm not going to say anything. It was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh man, it was great. Don't you dare talk about that. But then there's another group of people, unfortunately, who don't have that voice. They have been abused by it. And their account is very different. They've been silenced. And that's all around the world. It's not just the US. It's different military systems. And that's why when you understand the corporations of these countries, it helps you to put it into context and say, you know what? I can't change that system. That system has been like the way that it's been since the beginning.
Hundreds of years, yeah.
All I can do is figure out how I can fit into this world and not allow this world to cause me to lose my mind. And to help people live a more free life and to do what they need to do. And the military is going to be the military. And here's the flip side of it. That's what I say. It's a duality, because of my blue passport, if I'm somewhere and something jumps off, I know I can go to that U.S. embassy. So it's kind of a weird relationship.
Yeah. It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's kind of like if I get in trouble here, I can go to the U.S. embassy and I have certain rights that's going to protect me. But I have to. My mind is free because I can also recognize the other side of what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it is what it is. And so I'm able to process it like that. I don't have to pick one side or the other. Hey, when I need y'all, I have the access to you. But at the same time, some of the stuff you're doing is wrong. I recognize what you're doing. And so I'm not here I'm not gaslighting myself to say, well, I just got to go with what y'all tell me. It's like, no, what y'all doing is wrong over there. However, you know what? I got a situation, and when I needed to renew my passport, here we go. And so that gives me a level of freedom because I'm seeing with clarity, and I recognize what can I do to change it. The only thing I can do is change me, change my heart, change my mind, and inspire others to live the most fulfilled life they can live. And sometimes it's saying the things that they're thinking that gives them the freedom to say, hey, you can't change it, but you can definitely do better for yourself. Got deep here on How to Prosper.
We're getting real deep. Getting real deep. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize, because I grew up in Canada, but born in Ghana, raised in Canada, but a lot of people don't realize that my mom was really good at making us understand our Blackness.
Oh, good.
So she wanted to make sure we knew we were Ghanaian. So she did whatever possible so that we knew the language, knew the food, different things about the culture. And she said, we are Black. It doesn't matter where you are. Like, someone's not going to look at you and be like, when you're in North America, oh, are you from Ghana? Are you from North Carolina? Are you from Ontario? Like, they just see a Black person. So you will be treated as a Black person because that's what you are. And so she made us watch a lot of civil rights movies and documentaries on PBS. And she ordered the VHS when it was VHS. And then when it came to DVD, it was even more exciting. So she would order stuff from PBS that we would watch at home. And the one that I remember the most was Eyes on the Prize.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever saw it, but it was on PBS.
I think I remember it now. Yeah.
And what she taught us was that African Americans, Black people in America, she said she had a high level of respect of how much they fought for the things that they deserved. And that we have to know this history. So we learn the history. So I learned the history about, things that happened with African Americans and in Canada, African Canadians,
I was
Black
wondering about
Canadians.
that. Okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't get talked about a lot.
Hmm.
And in our school system doesn't teach about it either. Not really.
Really?
The city I grew up in is called St. Catharines. It's about 15 minutes from the New York State border.
Okay.
And Harriet Tubman, that's where she ended up when she came through the underground.
Hmm.
So I grew up in the city where Harriet Tubman lived when she came through the underground to Canada. And there was a small community there of Black people who were descendants of the
Underground
people who came from
Railroad.
the Underground Railroad, who were descendants of the slave trade there. And this history is one that a lot of African Americans don't know, because when I meet African Americans and sometimes I tell them where I live, they'll be like, oh, where's that? They don't know anything about it. I'm like, when I say St. Catharines, they should be able to be like, oh yeah, that's where Harriet Tubman was. But nobody's taught that.
No.
And I think that it's something that is very lacking in the school system. And somehow we as a people have to make the intentional decision to teach each other about
Absolutely
these things. So I love what you're doing. So many more people are learning from what you're doing. Have you been to Canada yet?
I have. Toronto.
When did you go? Which month did you go?
I went this was in the springtime.
Okay.
So like around April.
How was it?
It was a little chilly, but it was nice.
Yeah, April's a little bit chilly.
Yeah, but it was nice. I was able to manage.
Yeah. Next time you go, you should try going in the summer.
Okay. I want to spend some time in Canada, Montreal, and then Toronto, and then I want to get over to Calgary, Alberta.
I haven't been to Calgary yet.
Yeah, I want to check that part out. And
I haven't been there yet.
Yeah, and see that part of, because Canada has a fascinating story. French and British interests.
Yes.
Probably a little Dutch interest, and then you have a connection with Sierra Leone up in Nova Scotia.
Yes, and Liberia.
Yes,
definitely. With people call them the Scotians, the Black people who were there. And in Ontario, Uncle Tom's Cabin
is in Ontario. Okay,
I think it's like a 3 or 4 hour drive from Toronto.
We might need to add a Canada African diaspora Black history.
Yeah,
experience.
There needs to be one because there is a community there that doesn't. So we have there's a mixture of people who are descendants and then the people who came voluntarily through immigration. So there's a mixture of that in Canada for the Black community.
That is fascinating because I know of it, but I've never seen it. That's the one place, and it's right up the road. I mean, it's literally like an hour and a half flight to get to Toronto or Montreal.
Or if you're going to the Uncle Tom's Cabin, it's easier to go from Detroit.
Oh, go over Windsor?
Yeah.
Through Windsor and okay.
Yeah.
So see, that's something I'm going to put on my list. See, this is what happens. Places you never thought about going to.
Yeah.
When you sit down and have conversations, and your point is us educating each other.
Yeah.
Because I would have never known. If I didn't talk to you being a Canadian, a Black Canadian, a Ghanaian Canadian, and understanding the things that you've seen, the things you know. That's why these conversations are so important. That's why we need to engage each other more.
Yeah.
And that's what your show was doing.
Yeah. We even have a Black woman on our $10 bill.
Really?
In Canada. Yeah. I think I have one in my wallet now.
What?
Yes,
okay.
Please bring my yellow wallet. Yes, we have a Black woman on our $10 bill in Canada.
Interesting.
And I keep it in my wallet.
This is getting even more interesting, y'all.
I keep one in my wallet the last time I went there. Yes, so this woman refused to leave her seat in the movie theater because Black people weren't allowed to be in the movie theater. And so
she's like your own Rosa Parks.
Yeah, so.
And you all have this money that won't rip. This money right here, I couldn't rip it if I wanted to. It's like some sort of plastic metal thing, and you can't even. It reminds me of British pounds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, British pounds are like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a Black history as well that doesn't get talked about very often. But yeah, anyway, I digress. It's been a great conversation with you today.
Yes.
I'm just loving everything you're doing, and I'm looking forward to the movie.
Yes.
It's coming out soon. When is it coming out? What month?
We're looking to drop this at the beginning of 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we have on tap. At least the first, it's going to be a series.
Oh.
And we have your interview in it. So Ivy's been interviewed in it, and so many others here in Ghana as well as in the US. So be on the lookout for it. It's called Ghana, The Awakening.
The awakening, the awakening. And it certainly has been an awakening for a lot of people. For a lot of people. What would you say to somebody right now who's contemplating, should I go? Should I stay? Like, what is the thing that you think would make them make the decision to come and visit?
Stop overthinking it and just do it. I was overthinking. I almost canceled my trip. So if you just don't overthink it, just do it. Think about what's on the other side. If you've paid attention to this conversation, I've become a different person. It served an educational component, a therapeutic component, a financial component. All of these things I did not know existed when I was in the States. So here I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And Ghana is really like home. When I land here, I feel the same way I feel just like when I'm landing in the US. Same way. So don't overthink it. Just do it.
Just do it. And I had something that came to my mind. Now I'm having a brain fog moment.
That's all right.
Menopausal brain fog.
Hey.
What was I going to say?
Well, I'll say this, Ivy. I'm so incredibly, while you're coming through the fog. And we're going to have Ivy on my show too. So we're going to talk about this right here because, yeah, she's having a moment. We're going to talk about it. What I want everybody to understand is that you are the one in control of your future. And when I say that, meaning we can't control what's going to happen to us, but we can control the decisions we make on a daily basis. So if you decide to change your life, that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even anything that, that's 100% on you. You change your life, you make the decision, and here's an example of how to do it. There are ideas that you have. Maybe there's a book that you have. Maybe there's some place that you want to go you've always dreamed about going to, but what has happened is you've overthought it. You've thought your way out of it. Now you're seeing someone who used to do that, who didn't want to fly, but now able to go see the world and share these experiences with the world. I don't know what's on the other side for you, but I want you to at least begin the process of discovering it. Don't go to your grave with those dreams and those ideas. Live them out in this lifetime and see what the possibilities are. And so that's what my message is to you, whether you go with us or go with someone else. Get outside of the box and live. That's my word to you today.
I know that was a great positive message. I want to digress and just ask one negative one.
Yeah, come on with it.
What do you think about all the people who come and then they have these experiences where they decide to rant about the negatives about Ghana?
Sure.
Some people come and then they're talking about, well, this is this and this is that, and why are the roads like this, and
Sure.
why is the gutter this, and why is this, why is that? I mean, it's not a perfect country, is what I often say to people. It's a developing nation still. But what do you say to that when people come and now they're just blasting all the negatives and say that we're telling lies about Ghana? Because I've had some people say, you're telling lies. It's not all great.
Well, one thing I always tell people is don't romanticize any place. So first of all, a mature mind understands the dynamics, the nuances, and some of the dualities that happen within a culture. So when I see those videos, it's oftentimes from very immature minded people or very culturally immature minded people. When you go to a place and you have not had preparation, yes, it can be a culture shock. You can go like, whoa, look at these roads. Wow, they're still doing this because they're seeing it through their lens. And so a mature person stops to say, why is it like this? Why? What happened here? See, that's what I did before I went to, because I recognize the challenges too. But the one thing you don't deal with here in Ghana or many parts of Africa, carjackings, home invasions, there's certain trade-offs. So there's a level of peace that you get here. Now, one thing is some of my people in the US are incredibly entitled. Their mindset, they want to be bougie, but they broke or whatever the case is. And they come over here with this attitude. And I tell people coming on my tour, I said, leave that mess. Leave America in America. Don't even come on the tour if you're going to bring that energy, because the people don't need that. They're happy in their culture. But if you're coming over here with the saviors complex, then I got to go help these poor people without being able to see that they have something that we need. And yeah, sure, we have some things that can benefit the society. But I say to those folks, grow up. Really grow up. because there's a reason why you came here and you wanted to get out of that place in the first place. Like somebody getting out of I got to get out of my parents' house, and every place they go, they complain.
Yeah.
It's like, you just need to live on the streets. Just go live on the streets and then figure it out, because at some point we have to grow up and recognize that many of the conditions that we see come from the influence of the United States. And with the United States and the World Bank and the IMF and the currency system, it's not even the presidents and it's not even those people in these countries, because they really have very limited control. It's the imperial interest to come in and say, this is what the value of your currency is. When you look at the debt system with China, China goes into Jamaica, into Ghana, and builds all of the infrastructure, and builds all of the infrastructure in these places. And so as China is building the infrastructure, the ports, the seaports, the airports, and then roads, and they can import the different items that they have. And so many of the items that you'll see here in Oxford Street come from China. Many of the items you see in Addis Ababa and Ethiopia come from China. So there's a global system that we want to understand. Again, if you don't understand capitalism, there has to be a part of the world that's at the bottom that produces the resources, not or creates or offers the resources, but not necessarily producing the final or finished product. So when I come to Ghana, I recognize, okay, this area has intentionally been stripped of resources, whether it be natural resources, human resources, whatever it is that can be taken from this part of the world to prop up the UK and America and Canada and France and any place else. That gives me a little bit of grace in my mind to say, this is why things are the way they are. It's not just the presidents and all of that. Oh, our government is such and such. Who controls the government? Yeah. Who created the government? This is a European government system. In the Francophone countries, European government system. The only reason why this is a European government system in Anglophone countries like Ghana and Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa and the Gambia, when you have Black people walking around with white men's blonde wigs on their head in the judicial system. I know I ain't trying to get you in trouble. I know you got to live here. But I'm just sitting there saying to myself, I know something's wrong. It's the handwriting on the wall. And it's like, well, it's okay. It's like, whatever's on your crown, whatever's on your head tells you what's controlling a lot of what's going on. I understand. But the point is, that's the system. So when those of us who are Black American or Black Canadian or Black UK come and see things, you got to stop and say, okay, how does this system work? This is a peaceful place. I love this place as much as any place I've ever been in America. With all of the challenges, with all of the hustling, with all of the wanting for tips, with all of the poor customer service at times, I love this place. I will always sing its praises. But I'm, again, just like I'm not delusional with the U.S. in its situation. I love parts of the U.S. I'm not delusional with Ghana either. So I'm not going to sit here and just, romanticize it and say it's beautiful. It has challenges. But what place doesn't? A mature person understands that. An entitled, spoiled brat is going to complain and I can't believe they don't have this, and I can't believe it, and that and the other. And they're going to go through all those challenges wherever they go. It shows up in their relationships. It shows up on their jobs. It shows up. Now I'm getting deep. Now, I took it to a whole new place, right? It shows up in every aspect of their life. That's what I'm saying. What traveling does to you is it strips you down of some of these expectations, and it can soften you as a person. Some people travel in a bubble. They say, I've traveled all over the world, but you've only traveled in a bubble. You haven't traveled as a sponge. You haven't come to learn and absorb what could benefit you and transform you as a person. You're coming here looking at the people, looking down on the people, without recognizing that there's another group of people looking down on you. There's an interesting part in Tanzania, in the East African Slave Trade Museum. You go about 3/4 of the way back, it's on the wall on the right. And it talked about a person who was enslaved, and they won their freedom in court. And a reporter asked the person, now that you've gained your freedom, what do you want to go do? The person said, I'm going to go get a slave. And that, unfortunately, is the mindset that many people have. They would come here, some of those same people complaining would come here, complain about the US, come to Ghana, and treat the Ghanaian people the same way they were treated in the US. This is real. I know y'all a little nervous or whatever. No, you can't be nervous because you know what I'm talking about.
I've heard people say this.
It's real.
Yeah.
It is so.
I've heard Ghanaians say this. I've heard some Ghanaians say that they feel like they're being mistreated or they're being treated like they're lower class.
Yeah, and that's one thing I have zero tolerance for. That if you want to see me really get amped up, is to have someone who's coming from a place and they're complaining about racism and being mistreated, and then they come to a place and they do the very same thing. Mm-hmm. At that point, I'm like, y'all need to be taken out in the back. Whatever happened to you, they need to get the tires out over here in Ghana and give them some of that street justice. But you know, Ivy, it's these things, these conversations that we need to have. That there are a lot of Black Americans who are willing to shift their mindset. Obviously, everyone has the ability to go and have their own opinion about their experience. So I'll never fault someone for sharing their opinion. Mm-hmm. That's their subjective interpretation of their experience. But what I do challenge people to do is to understand the broader context. That broader context will save your life. When you show up in the world, you'll show up differently. Mm-hmm. You'll have grace. There are times I get tired of waiting for my food an hour and a half here. I'm sitting there like, did y'all go start growing it the minute I walked in the door? It doesn't take that long to get some contumely. It doesn't take that long to get some Kelly Welly. But here we are an hour and a half later, and then I know when it's time to collect the check, it's going to take another hour. So I'm going to ask for the check.
When you order the food.
But that's just a part of it. It's giving me patience. Mm-hmm. It's giving me grace. I look at the person and say, this person doesn't mean harm. Why do I have to be abusive? Why do I have to be mean to this person? Why can't I just... Hey, don't forget my lunch, my Kelly Welly. Yes, please, it's coming. Hey, 10 minutes later, hey, did you remember my Kelly Welly? Yes, please, it's coming. It's like, you know what? But I prepare myself for it. And you can, you know, when I said that people get into relationships and it shows up, you have a lot of our, I have people from all generations. I would say elders, but then I see it in all generations, especially working in tourism. You see people who are just nasty. They're mean. They're not kind. And I even have grace for them because I understand this is coming from someplace. And they probably need to be on this trip more than anybody because they're so mean and so nasty and these are people who've raised families. And I say to myself, I don't know their story. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that person has gone through. I can see them wearing their issues. I can see what the issue is. Yeah. And I said, you know what? My hope and my prayer is that they will get something from the experience that'll soften that edge a little bit. And that's what we need in the US. It's a softened edge. Many of us are traumatized and don't even know we're traumatized. We're just thinking this is how we talk to each other and how we treat each other. We think it's normal behavior. Yeah. As a Black American man, oftentimes I'm having to prove myself even more. I have to have extra conversations with people just to prove to them that I'm not going to run off with their money or I'm legit, no matter how many testimonials, no matter how much. So I even have to have patience with that process because internally, I'm thinking some other thoughts. I ain't got to be sitting there doing all this jump through hoops for y'all, you know, but I do it because I understand I want them to get it. Mm-hmm. And then once they go on from there, you know, if we're going to change narratives, we got to take a couple whippings along the way, you know, so. Oh boy. Wow.
Well, Jay, it's been great talking to you today. Yes. I know you're ready to go somewhere else to another country.
South Africa. I'm on my way to South Africa.
How long are you there?
I'll be there a couple of days and then I'm coming back to Ghana. We have a group going there. I love South Africa. I love the South African people. The story mirrors the US a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of respect for the South African people who fought against the nonsense of the Dutch and the British and the Namibian people who fought against the nonsense of the Germans. Mm-hmm. I have so much respect for those people. It is every time I go there, I get a different kind of feeling. I get a feeling coming here, but when I go to South Africa, I can get past all the glitz and the glam and the new age stuff and everything that's, you know, all the luxury. And I love talking to the people. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful thing. So I'm looking forward to that. Then I'll be back here in Ghana for a little while.
That's good. Well, have a safe trip. Thank you for the time today, and thank you for a great conversation. For those of you who want to follow him, you can find him at J Cameron. So easy. J Cameron Official on Instagram.
That's right.
J Cameron on YouTube, as well as on X. You're on X?
I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. Type in J Cameron. You'll see this crazy face.
Yes.
Hey!
You'll see it. He's doing some amazing work, and you'll want to follow him. You definitely want to follow him. You have great conversations. I love all the conversations you have with people. It's always interesting to see and learn and grow. Don't forget to share this video too with anybody who you think might be interested in learning more about his story or other stories that I have coming up on this channel when I talk to people from Africa and the African diaspora, sharing stories here in Ghana. And hopefully I'll be traveling outside of Ghana sometime soon and share stories with you from other countries as well. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Abby Prosper, and I'll see you again.